Hi guys, this is Cindy from Part-Time Permies, and today we're doing a little video on how we make our nursery tractors. We did put this video together because we've had a couple people asking about it, including Tina, one of our regulars, who asked, how do we make a nursery tractor for our broody girls. So this is prototype 1. It was made primarily with 2x4s, a couple 2x3s, but primarily 2x4s and what I had on hand. Although I will say this one is the heavier of the two coops and a little bit more difficult to shift. The whole idea was to make something that could hold a mom and her chicks and have her raise her chick while rotating them on pasture, and to keep it as simple as possible. Initially, this is 8 feet long, 2 feet wide, or 2 feet high and 3 feet wide, or approximately that. Technically, each board is 8 feet long, 2 feet high, or 3 feet wide. So it is a little more than that on actual dimensions here, because once you put the boards together. So what we did was I created 2 side frames, basically 2 boxes, long boxes, 8-foot board, 2-foot high board, and then did that on the other side. We used 4 2-foot boards in the framing vertically to hold it together, 1 on each end and then 2 in the middle. One of them does divide the coop end from the run end, and we did that for both sides. Connecting those, we have another set of boxes. We have 4 of these, so they are 2x4 boxes, 3 feet long by 2 feet high. And we just attach these boxes inside of the frames for the outer boxes. There's 4 of those. Again, 1 to divide the coop from the main area, and then 1 in the middle and 1 up front here, just for structural support. The other thing the front 2 boxes are used for is attachments for our handles. These handles are 2x3s. They're a little easier to hold onto than 2x4s. They're a little more the size of your grip. They are attached just below the top piece in each of these frames and stick out about 8 inches or so. Now the walls of each frame is basically made from 1/2-inch hardware cloth, and on each of the sides and on the top we do have that extending around the side inside the walls of the coop end as well. The coop end is made of on top of the hardware cloth on the sides, we have the plastic corrugated roofing material that's really lightweight. We did use a piece of that for blocking off part of this front end of the coop. So we left a doorway and the front end closed. That gives a nice quiet dark little corner on one side of the coop. That's where I put my nest box, and for my nest box I actually just use dollar store dish bins. So I put bedding around it so it doesn't tip over when the girl gets in and out. Put some bedding in it, and she pretty much takes to that. I also use those dish bins as nest boxes in my main coops. That also makes it so I can just lift them out when they go broody and carrying them over. So that makes it easy to transfer, especially trying to do that at night and not wake them up and disturb their broodiness. On the door end of the coop, we do set up a little tray scenario for the food and water. I basically take another one of those dish bins, turn it upside down, use it as a tabletop, even surface for food and water. That puts the food across from the broody girl, so she has to get up off the nest box to go eat and drink and take care of herself before going back to the nest. That's important because you don't want her pooping in the nest. That makes for very dirty eggs and less likely to hatch. Ideally, you'd like her to come out in the run to take care of business, but some girls will do that, some girls will just do it wherever they're eating. So you want to make sure the food and water is far enough away that actually gets them up off their nest, so they go to their food dish and take care of everything at the other end of that area. The access point to the coop end is the roof. So what I did was, on the front end, I did put just a scrap board. Now in this case, I believe it's a 2x6 that lifted the roof up a little bit in front, and put that directly over one of the box frames. And then I made a framing for the roof. Since the roof is just over 3 feet wide, these corrugated roofing materials come in basically 26-inch widths. That gives them enough room to overlap each other a little bit and basically be at a 4-foot width, which does give you a little overlap on either side. So what I did was create a frame for that to go onto, made it a little bit longer than the actual coop area. So it slopes, because it's higher in front than in back, it slopes and the rain washes off the back end. So it doesn't actually pour on the girl if she's trying to get into the run area. It's on hinges on the back end, and on the front end we have, on this version, 2 latches, one on either side with D-clips or carabiners, whatever you want to call them, to hold it closed. You can use linchpins, you can use whatever to hold that closed. But you use a latch either on either end, or you can use just one in the middle, which I use on version 2 to save a little cash on hardware. But that roof will lift up and give you access to give her more food and water, or check on how she's doing if you need to handle eggs or anything like that. That is your primary access point to the coop. That also makes for easy clean out from the top, so you don't have to be leaning down and reaching in and cleaning out. I basically, when I clean these things out, I push all the bedding material out the door and into the run, and then I just shift the coop off that area, and you can spread that out wherever you like to use as a mulch system. Inside the coop, the flooring of this coop is actually made of a board that's cut to fit inside there. It's tacked on to the 2x4s along the edges of that board, and then all the bedding is placed on top of that. I did also put a little lip along the front doorway a little bit, just to catch some of the bedding so that you can have a couple inches of bedding without it all being knocked out. On the rear of this coop, I did have a couple wheels that I placed on the back end, so that when you tipped the coop up to move it, it put some of the weight on the back wheels to help shift it. That is kind of a hard angle on those wheels, so those did fall off. The second version of the coop, I didn't even use wheels because it seems to slide just fine. Okay, so this is version 2 of the Nursery Tractor. And with this one, we tried to lean it down a little bit. We used smaller boards. We used 2x3s on this one instead of 2x4s. And instead of doing a box around the outside and boxes down the middle, what I ended up doing was, same idea, using boards that are 8 feet long for the length, 3 feet wide for the width, and 2 feet high for the height, to keep everything even measurements and try to make the utility of my 8 foot long boards and the cuts more even, so I used more and had less scrap. In this case, what I did first was I made the 4 boxes that go on the interior, one in the front, the one I'm sitting on, the one that is the divider between the coop and the run, and then the one on the back. Those squares are actually made the same way. I just took to the 2 foot high boards, 3 foot high boards, connect them, made a box out of them. Now this time, instead of making a box for the outer parts, I made a couple changes. Basically, I took my 8 foot long board and created a runner on the bottom that sticks out about 6 inches beyond the back of the coop, which also means, since I'm not cutting my 8 foot boards, that the runners on the top stick out in the front about 6 inches. That gave me handles without using extra boards. That gave me some leverage to lift this up a little bit in the back and have hopefully less drag on the back, because you don't have the cross pieces dragging when you lift this. And it's in all a lot lighter because we're using fewer boards, but we're also using 2x3s instead of 2x4s. Couple other changes I made to this. I wanted it to have a little more ventilation than the other coop. So on the sides of the coop end, I just ran the roofing material up to the height of the horizontal top of the run, and had a board go across on the angle at the top to connect my hardware cloth to, but basically otherwise left it open in the top to get some cross ventilation across that top end. Because there was more space there, I was also a little concerned about rainwater getting in, so I didn't overlap my roofing materials as much. I spread them out a little bit more, which means I do have a little bit of a flap over here. It does catch the wind a little bit, so if you're going to do that, it might be worth having the framing go all the way out to the edge, which I didn't do on this because it will flap around a little bit. But we did that on both sides to kind of give a little bit more weather protection if we have some angle rain coming in. One other change I made on this coop that's a little different from the other one is on the front end I added a door. So it's a door that basically swings up, has hinges on the top. Now, one change I would make if I'm doing this again, I was trying to keep the weight down on this, but I used 1x2s for that door framing, and then I put the hardware cloth on it and then hinged it. It's not as strong as I would like, so I think if I did that again I'd use 2x2s. That door has a latch on either side at the bottom. That way you can actually get your chicks used to roaming outside before you permanently move them out. It's also a good way to get them introduced to the flock, because then you can basically open that door just enough where the chicks can get in and out, but the big girls cannot. So it gives them a safety place to run back to if needed. This one also has a little bit steeper angle of the roof here, and that's mainly because I was using scrap boards for my top piece to lift it up a little bit. So this one has, it's about 10x1 where this is attached. This one only has one latch in the middle instead of one on either side. I think if I'm doing this again, which I probably will make a third one here eventually, been meaning to last fall or this spring, just never got to it. But I think one thing I will try is potentially using 2x2 boards for some of this. Instead of the 1x2s, definitely on the doors. I think the framing would do better with 2x2s. But even some of these boxes in the middle could potentially be 2x2s instead of 2x3s or 2x4s, which would cut the weight even a little further, make it a little bit lighter. One thing we're running into right now is I can't shift this because my weight restrictions at the moment, being pregnant. So Mike is having to shift this instead. It's not hard to, it's just a little cumbersome. So maybe 2x2s in some areas would actually work better and make this a little bit lighter, as long as the integrity and the strength hold up. So I think on the runner boards I will stick with 2x3s, and maybe on the square pieces in the holding the two sides together will be 2x2s. One other adjustment I would potentially make would be on this front, not on the very first box, but on the second box here that I was sitting on. I'd probably take the board that's on the base, same vertical height for the vertical boards, but I'd probably take the board that's on the base and move it up about 6 inches, just so it can be a roost out here for the chicks if they want to roost. Plus that way when you're moving them, you're not going to smush them, as you have one less thing to smush them on if they get caught right before that board. But you know, basically this design I do like a little better than the first design, making slight improvements each time we put a new one together. If you have any other ideas on adjustments to the system, let me know in the comments, and otherwise we'll see you with our next video. Thanks.